Good morning. It's 10:35 and we're going to get started with the webinar and the public comment session on the Round 16 grant policies and scoring matrix for rental and limited equity cooperative projects. I'm Angie Hubbard, Director of the Housing Division. I think on screen you probably can see James Dean and Catherine Middlebrooks and some of our other team members. Thank you for being on today. If you are joining and are interested in the homeownership opportunities or the owner-occupied rehab opportunities, we have already conducted those sessions and can share videos with you once those become available. And also remind you that you have an opportunity to still submit questions and comments. But we will not be taking any comments or questions on homeownership projects or owner-occupied rehab. So today I'm going to go through slides that are essentially organized the same way as the documents that are posted on our website, going through the various components such as the purpose of the RFA, an overview of our funding information, brief discussion on eligibility requirements, and going all the way through to the very end of the grant policy. I'm going to pause after each section to allow time for comments and questions. This helps us keep the comments and questions organized by topic area to better address them. But again, if you think of something later, we can go back and capture your comment or question, and then there will be time at the end if time allows. And then, of course, there is an opportunity to submit your comments in writing as well. So to participate in the webinar, we're going to ask that you raise your hand anytime that you have a comment. Stephanie from ITS will call your name. When she does, please hit the unmute button. When you're finished speaking, please lower your hand. We are going to ask that you raise your hand anytime you make a comment, whether it's a follow-up to one that you've just made, just so we can manage the conversations better. If you prefer to type your comments, please use the chat box. The graphics on the screen show you where these should be appearing on your screen. If you wish to make a comment after we read your chat, then please raise your hand. We are asking to please provide constructive and specific comments. By constructive, we mean that the comments or questions are to ask for clarification or lead to an improved or better application, not necessarily to lead to advice or any questions related to a specific application. And specific comments, if you see something on a particular page that you want to reference, we're happy to take that page number so we can make sure and look at that when we are reviewing the comments and making updates. We do ask that you're respectful of staff and other participants. I'm sure everyone would like the same equal opportunity to talk, so we ask that not one person dominate the conversation, but allow plenty of time for others to speak as well. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. So I'm going to start with the first slide on the RFA purpose. This is to solicit applications from qualified nonprofit organizations looking to apply for grant funds to create and preserve affordable rental and limited equity cooperative housing. The purpose of an RFA and this competitive process is to provide for the fair and equitable treatment of all organizations involved in applying for grant funds. Therefore, we're not going to address a comment or a question that is specific and unique to a particular application, but more specifically around clarification around the policies or comments on the policies in general, to give everyone that fair treatment. And this is also to ensure transparency in the award of funds. Everyone is evaluated according to the same criteria. I will pause there if there are any comments or questions. Okay, moving to the next slide. This is an overview of the funding that will be made available when we release the final applications in the request for applications in February. We are still waiting on the final totals. We do believe it's going to be around 19 million, a little, maybe 19,200,000 roughly in that ballpark. The finals will be in the release. And this shows the maximum award cap proposed for large pool, meaning these are any organization not applying for funds under the small organization set aside. If you are a small organization and looking to apply under that set aside, the maximum award per project is $750,000. Then later in the table, you can see the proposed allocations by project type, and as well as the maximum points available. You can see that not every project type is evaluated using the same level of scoring criteria based on the complexity of the project types, as well as what we're looking to achieve with the various project types. The only project type that will have an opportunity for bonus points is the rental and limited equity cooperative housing. And you can see the minimum score that's going to be required before an application can move forward in evaluation, assuming that it has passed all threshold criteria. I will pause here for any questions or comments. Okay, seeing none. Next is just an overview of the Unified Housing Strategy policy priorities. We aren't taking comments on these priorities as they are already in the Unified Housing Strategy. We had robust engagement in the development of the UHS, as well as deep data analyses, and then we followed up with additional engagement once we released the draft in the spring. So these are the policy priorities that remain steadfast in our Unified Housing Strategy. Happy to answer any questions related to these, however, so I'm going to pause if there are any questions. And our full Unified Housing Strategy is available at nashville.gov/UHS if you would like to read that more. Moving in then to some meat of the grant policy is the eligibility requirements, starting with the threshold criteria. This shouldn't be new to returning applicants, except for some of the highlighted items. These are not new to Metro grantees. We are adding them in to make sure we're fully compliant with the Office of Financial Accountability's grants manual. This will include, in addition to all the typical documentation we required, demonstration of registration with the Secretary of State's Office of Charitable Solicitations, meaning that you are your organization is able to solicit funds in Tennessee as of the date of the application. We are also asking that the applicant read and acknowledge the Nonprofits Grants Manual. The link is available. This, you will notice, however, that the OFA version does not include the types of costs that we allow in the Barnes Fund. So we're going to work with OFA to update that, but all the other contents of the OFA grants manual are applicable to the grant funds, including any of the financial responsibilities, contractual responsibilities of a grantee. And then also highlighted is the threshold requirement that an annual audit most recent annual audit be submitted with the application. There will not be a grace period this time to allow an organization 3 months. We cannot go to council for a contract, nor can we now go for an amendment without these audits. This does mean an organization needs to have been in existence for at least 1 year to have had an annual audit. And this is regardless of the size of the organization. I believe there's been some confusion before because smaller organizations that may not meet the typical threshold for doing an independent audit according to generally accepted auditing standards, or they haven't had to do a single audit because they don't receive a certain level of federal funds. If you are applying for more than $50,000 of Metro funds, you must have this audit. We're also going to be evaluating, if you've looked at the evaluation factors, whether or not there are any outstanding findings. So it's also important that it's part of the evaluation criteria. But if you don't submit the audit, you don't pass threshold. The other part next is regarding outstanding legal claims. One change we've made, we had previously said safety violations would be prohibited. We've changed that to specifically to mean OSHA related violations. So that is a new or a change from the last few rounds. Then finally, typical that you have seen, the developer fee cannot exceed 20% of the funding request, and then the applicant must have some form of site control. That's through either a deed that shows that the applicant has some control over that property, a minimum of a 30-year ground lease to match the affordability term. However, if the affordability term, if you're proposing longer than 30 years, the ground lease must show the term that you are proposing. And then finally, we will accept an option agreement and a signed sales contract as an indication of site control. So if none of these, if you can't provide every single one of these, or if you have a yes to an outstanding legal claim that's on this list, you will not be able to move forward in the evaluation process. So I will pause and take any questions or comments.
Kelsey, I'm sending the request to unmute now.
Good morning. This is Kelsey Wilson with Nelson Community Partners. I've also got Mick here in the office. Just wanted to clarify on the registration of soliciting public funds. If a nonprofit has its, I guess, corporate headquarters essentially in a different state, are they able to still get that registration in Tennessee? And if so, is that the requirement, or could they provide documentation that they're in good standing in the state where they were chartered?
We will get that clarification from the Office of Financial Accountability. The wording that is included in the grant policy and on the screen is taken directly from the grant manual, but we will ask if it will be acceptable. If you will, perhaps Kelsey, follow up with that in writing so we can share that specifically with the Office of Financial Accountability.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments before I move on to the next screen?
Carter, I am sending the request to unmute now. Carter, you may have to hit the unmute button so we'll be able to hear you.
Y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, so just a question on the outstanding legal claims. We don't have any, but I know with a competitor firm, there were suing a some type of subcontractor. There are legal claims that get submitted through insurance all the time, like slip and falls. I just wanted to get more clarity on small little things like that that are covered by insurance. Does that still disqualify us? We don't have any pending. I just know that these things happen when you own a lot of apartments.
So the safety-related claims that probably would have captured that, and we'll clarify outstanding legal claims to be more specific also, because that could capture some of the things that you've said, but we've changed the safety-related to being a specific OSHA violation. So a slip and fall or something like that we would not bar a applicant.
Great. Yeah. If you all could just clarify what type of legal claims, because I know.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I am not seeing any more. Oh, wait, Kelsey, I see your hand just raised again. You should be able to unmute.
Hey, this is Mick. Hey, everybody. Just want to pose the question: should it be claims or should it be judgments? In terms of this, I can see the pros and cons of each approach. Just wanted to pose the question and get your thoughts about whether these should be, complaints or judgments, claims. Just want to get your 2 cents on that.
So we will clarify with Metro Legal what they're comfortable with on how far, where something should be a violation or a claim, or whether we should wait on a judgment. With regard to fair housing, we would also want to talk to the Office of Fair Housing in Nashville on what the concerns are, is making sure that we are partnering with organizations that are very diligent in their adherence to laws regarding fair housing, regarding how they're paying their contractors and subcontractors, and making sure they're creating a safe environment. And or there are no other judgments or issues out there that could put the project at risk. But we also are aware of, we're a litigious society, and there could be frivolous claims or claims that are dismissed. So we will talk with Metro Legal before that final before the final policies are published.
Great, thank you.
I am not seeing any more questions or comments at this time.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. Those were great comments and great things for us to consider and get clarification on. Okay, next is eligibility requirements. I'm first going to talk about eligible projects and cost. You can read more about these in the grant policies, but I do want to highlight eligible projects. This time there was a robust discussion in the work sessions following round 15, and which has led to funding being limited to new projects only. This is a new building or a home. If rental can be scattered sites, so we're not always talking about multifamily. When I say a home, I'm also meaning units. That has not received a previous Barnes Fund award. So a home or a building in a multi-phase development would be eligible as long as those homes or buildings were not included in a previous funding award. So for example, if there is a development with 2 or 3 phases in it, and one building in the building in phase 1 received a previous Barnes Fund award, buildings in subsequent phases would be allowed. We are also, allowing funds to be used in a range of housing typologies, from single family detached to multifamily buildings. That's not any type of restriction. Projects may be new construction. They may be the conversion from another use, like a motel, to an eligible rental or limited equity cooperative project, or the rehab of existing rental homes. And then finally, applicants can only submit one application per project site. So you cannot double up on funding at a particular project site. So if you do have multiple buildings at a site, at an address, we do want to make sure those are incorporated in one single application. And then eligible costs, we're allowing costs for acquisition of property, soft cost, and that's a change from our prior term of pre-development cost, construction cost, and we will require up to 30% of the grant award to be for the construction cost, and then the developer fee. And the developer fee is different than the soft cost. These are defined in the grant policies. So I will pause for any comments or questions.
Kelsey, you should be able to, or Mick, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, quick question on the project types. It mentions condos as an eligible typology, I think just in reference to multifamily attached, but just wanted to make sure that condos would actually be considered under a home ownership structure.
Yeah, that was actually, I recognized that when I was preparing the slides, and so that will be changed for the rental.
Great. And then under acquisition costs, we're wondering about changing land to property, understanding that rehab of multifamily rental, I think, is an eligible cost. And so being able to use those funds for acquisition of not just land, but also improvements.
Yes, absolutely. We can add that in and make that a clarification. Thank you. I think I saw something pop up in the chat. Was there a chat comment?
Yes, question comes from Kevin. Will there be a way to access these slides after the webinar concludes?
Yes. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, moving on to ineligible projects and costs. Again, none of these funds for this RFA can be used for anything related to homeownership opportunities or owner-occupied rehab. And again, it also cannot be used in projects which are buildings or homes that have previously received a Barnes Fund award, even if the purpose is to create net new affordable homes in a previously funded building. Then ineligible cost would be to use the Barnes Fund to refinance or pay off existing debt, with the exception of a loan from the Catalyst Fund. Catalyst that was actually designed to be taken out by Barnes Fund grant or other longer term equity or financing. Also, funds cannot be used for relocation costs. So if you're doing any of the rental rehab, relocation costs would not be an eligible activity. Rental assistance, supportive services, home buyer subsidies, or for the operating expenses of the grantee or any member of the development team not related to the management and oversight of the project. So the developer fee, as you've seen defined, is for those expenses and costs to the grantee and the team, strictly related to the oversight and management of this grant. So it's not intended to cover payroll of an organization outside of supporting the staff that are working on the grant or in some form or fashion. It could even, if you've got finance staff working on portions of the grant, that could be part of the developer fee, but not just blanket payroll. So I will pause there and take any questions or comments.
Eric, I'm sending the request to unmute now.
Hi, yeah, Eric Trent with Trent Development Group. Quick question just on the supportive services and eligible costs. Is that just for the service itself? Like if you were, adding a supportive service portion to your clubhouse or something like that, the construction cost of that would still be eligible, right? It's just the actual service itself that is ineligible?
Correct. It's funding someone to provide those services that would not be eligible. So we will make sure and clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Kelsey, you should be able to unmute now.
This is Mick. Just to clarify, and I think this is what you said, Angie, but traditionally we sort of understand developer fee is what sort of pays for people's time working on the project. But I just wanted to clarify, like, let's just say, oh, we've got a project manager working on a project and they're going to do 20% of their time. Could there be a separate line item in the grant application that sort of covers that, just to clarify the best way to think about it and how you all are want us to approach it?
I mean, in the sources and uses, we're just going to capture developer fee. We can include a narrative portion for the or a line item budget for the applicants to propose how the developer fee will be structured and who that will pay for. Sometimes it may not all wash out. You may not know exactly how much time someone may spend in that budget. So we want to give that flexibility. You will be required to submit the documentation for a developer fee, and at that point, that will indicate to us how it's being utilized. But Metro has the authority through either our staff, OFA, or a third-party contractor to review the general ledger of an organization. And if in reviewing that ledger, it appears that Barnes Fund grant proceeds have been used to support general nonprofit expenses that can't be tied directly back, then Metro could recoup that money.
And then we have a question from Dwayne. Does a current loan on a site have to be refinanced with a Catalyst Fund loan to maintain eligibility?
I think that was also asked in the homeownership round, and we will talk with Metro Legal. The concern would be any debt or anything already encumbering the property that would make our deed of restrictive covenant subordinate to another existing lien, would possibly create a concern on how we could enforce our affordability restrictions. So that's one thing we'll work through with Metro Legal.
And I am not seeing any more questions at this time.
Okay. Moving on, we're going to get into some general project requirements. Some of this should not be new, and just to make sure everyone understands what some of the major obligations are of a grantee. During the entire affordability period, the grantee must pay all taxes or a payment in lieu of tax, if that's applicable, if it's a LIHTC or otherwise getting a pilot. All insurance assessments on the property. Again, this is in the next bullets in the contract and also in the grant policies about acknowledging Metro and the Barnes Fund contribution to the project if there are any signage or materials prepared or printed. Next is new, which is asking that the housing division be notified of any project-related events such as groundbreakings and ribbon cuttings. We want to make sure that we can help celebrate and acknowledge all the great work that's happening in the community. Not new is that the grantee must adhere to any and all licensing requirements and business regulations, both at the state, local, and federal levels. Affirm that the grantee nor any team member has a personnel policy that is contrary to state or federal laws regarding discrimination in employment practices, and then also demonstrating understanding and compliance with the Fair Housing Act. Any comments or questions? Okay, next slide. Project-specific requirements, and when I use the term home, I'm also meaning unit. So the home or any unit funded with the Barnes Fund grant must be the primary residence of the tenant or resident of that unit. It cannot be sublet or used as a short-term rental. The grantee cannot increase the tenant's portion of the rent during the lease term, but that doesn't apply, at lease renewal or, and I'll just say this in plainer English. Some programs like the low-income housing tax credit program have some developers or management companies have lease agreements that if the AMI and the fair market rents go up during a lease term, the rent can be adjusted as those increases happen. We are prohibiting that with any Barnes Fund units. That does not apply, however, if there is a voucher and the voucher can pick up that difference as long as the tenant's portion is not increased anytime during their lease period. And then we will also ask for and require that the grantee provide Metro with a management plan on how it will provide oversight of rent certification, utility allowances, handling tenant income increases, and any other requirements we may ask for in the contract. Any questions or comments on project-specific requirements? Okay. Next, we're going to get into the evaluation and scoring criteria, starting with housing security criteria. And I have already corrected in the red line version where the points weren't updated in the totals. So, but on the screen, these are correct. So we have 3 general sections of the evaluation criteria: housing security criteria, project approach, and underwriting. And then actually for rental, there's a 4th with bonus points. So we're starting with, I first want to make sure everyone recognizes that when you see a list of criteria with or as an option, and there really shouldn't be an or after this this last target of 20%, but that means the applicant can only get 1 set of points. For example, if an applicant is proposing to target at least 20% of the Barnes Fund homes for households, this should be 30% AMI. I apologize. I copied straight over from homeownership. You can only get the max of 8 points. You don't get the total of all the other lower. So that's why the maximum points under income targets is 8. And I will clarify that target AMI is incorrect. For rental, it is, as published in the evaluation criteria online. Same with affordability term. If someone is proposing 80 years, the max points are 80 or more years. The max points are 10. And you will not be getting a compilation or adding up all the other points in that category. Then you can see the rest of the evaluation criteria. If there is no or after, an applicant may qualify for all the max points in that section or in that subsection of the evaluation criteria. So I will pause here and take any questions or comments. Okay. Moving to project approach criteria, again, we do have some or options when it comes to project location and access. All access corridors are those that are identified in our Choose How You Move program, and we will provide information on how you can determine if your project site is near an all access corridor. I saw a chat pop up, so I'm going to pause and see if it is for this current screen or a previous slide.
A previous slide, it was on the bottom of it.
Okay.
The question I have is there's a reasonable time to pay overdue rent and fees to avoid eviction. Can you guys define what reasonable time is?
We will define that in the final. Thank you for asking for that clarification. Our policy team, we will get with the policy team that helped do the research and include these recommendations or this evaluation criteria.
And then Kelsey or Mick, you can unmute at this time.
Thanks. Sorry, I thought we were maybe gonna go into detail on each of these, so was waiting. Couple of really small things. On the affordability term, just wanted to make sure that, like, if somebody's just meeting the 30-year requirement, that would not count it. Like, is it 31 to 40 years to get 2 points? Again, minor.
You'll get, thank you. Yeah, there is a range because we can't give a point for every single year up to 80 plus years, or that would be like 80 points. So there would be up to 2 points between the 31 and 40. We will provide guidance to the evaluation criteria and so on within each of those ranges. So yeah, someone could do 31 and but still they're not going to get a whole lot of points, but there is really open to recommendations on a better way to score this without assigning a point to each year after year 31 through year 80.
Oh,
year
yeah.
99.
Yeah, I was more just thinking kind of stating a range of like 31 to 40 years, 41
Okay.
to 50 for clarification.
Perfect.
On the special populations, and it's not showing here, but I think it mentions older adults, and was just curious if Barnes has a preference for 55 plus or 62 plus. There's, of course, different program requirements for other different funding sources, and wasn't sure what Barnes was going to stick to.
Let me go back. We'll get with the policy team on the UHS for that clarification.
Okay. Similarly, I think it refers to single parent households as a special population, and there might be a designation that I'm not familiar with, but was concerned about potential fair housing complications related to family status.
We will certainly evaluate that as well.
And then I think similar to Carter's question, there's a mention of individual consideration of background factors. And again, just want to make sure that we're not setting grantees up for fair housing violations if they don't have a stated policy for how to evaluate those considerations. I know there's a lot of different, again, program guidelines, but the more explicit I think we can be to just make sure that everyone's abiding by fair housing rules.
Thank you, Kelsey. Appreciate those comments. We will definitely make sure we don't include any criteria or requirements that could run afoul of fair housing, and we'll make sure and give grantees clear guidance on that in the final release.
And I'll just add, it's Mick here again, that just context, and you all may be well aware of that, but 30% of AMI, the rents that the property receives, is about the cost of operating a unit. So if we say have 80 years of 30% AMI, it's going to be hard for those projects to support debt to improve the properties over that period of time. And just want to flag that as if you can't borrow money for a unit that's at 30% AMI. And so there may be substantial deterioration of those units over time that the project may not have the resources to go and upgrade at those income levels. So just want to flag that as something as we get to 40, 50, 60 years to be aware of. And I understand the huge need at 30% AMI and the benefits of potential longer term affordability, but just want to make sure, just sort of flag that as something that I worry about for those units over the long term.
Mick, thank you for highlighting that. These are policy priorities. We understand how the financing works. It is really up to the applicant on where they want to get their points and how they can demonstrate that they do that and that they fully understand the ramifications of that. If they're proposing a longer affordability term, it may not be feasible to do the income target. But these are the policy priorities we're hoping to achieve through various ways and looking for the applicants to do their due diligence on what they can reasonably achieve and propose. Because this is the evaluation factors are balanced in a way to give some options and some flexibility around the projects.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
I am not seeing any more at this time.
Okay, we'll go back to project approach. With the, I talked through location and access and that we will be providing information, clear information on how to identify an all access corridor. The next you can see their evaluation criteria around neighborhood and community benefits. I believe from our work session presentation, we deleted a childcare and just left it with a commercial space option and with only 1 point. Design quality is looking at the character and context of the neighborhood. We're going to look for the grantee to tell us how they went about that with the narrative. You saw that, or you will see that you have to check off at least 10 criteria in the universal design checklist, be evaluated on if you do more than that. And going back to Kelsey's previous comments, we'll make sure that we include ranges. So these don't look like hard and fast numbers that you have to do either 15 or 20 to get those points. And then this is where you would also provide or be able to score points if you have any on-site amenities. Then same thing with the sustainability and resiliency. There's an opportunity to do more points. There is no or after that second incorporates 20 elements. That is the next one is its own standalone on incorporating all elements. Oh no, it is an or. Sorry, you can choose to incorporate all elements. There aren't as many elements on the sustainability checklist as there are on the universal design. And then there's separate points on educating residents on energy efficiency and sustainability practices. So any questions or comments there?
Kelsey, you can unmute at this time.
Hi. Just wanted to ask about the design quality section a little bit, the character and context of the neighborhood. And I think you mentioned that would be a narrative response, but it feels difficult perhaps for reviewers to know the context of neighborhoods and accurately assess how well projects are kind of responding to that. I know it's only a couple points, but feels really subjective, and I don't know that there's a better question, but just wanted to note that.
Thank you. We will work with our design studio team at planning to craft the question in the application to where the applicant is describing to us what that character and context is of the neighborhood and how they're working to achieve that. And then we can, staff can provide guidance, or you have a design studio team member also provide some guidance on the various areas or various neighborhoods that are being proposed in the applications. So we'll work on a way. And again, some of the evaluation criteria is based on that description and how well an applicant responds to the questions being asked.
On the broadband and high-speed internet available, does that mean that it's available in the neighborhood? For example, Google Fiber is in East Nashville, or does that mean that like the units are pre-wired, for example, for a resident to plug in a router?
It is available at the site. And so that it could be incorporated in some form or fashion. If it's available in a particular area of town, but it's 5 streets over and it's not available at that site, then that's what we would consider. I don't know. I'll also talk with James, because he's actually worked on some broadband projects, on if there's additional clarification we can provide for you.
Okay. And then my last, I don't know, Nick has others, but the energy efficiency and sustainability checklist, if it's still the one that's been used in years past, there's only 19 criteria on that checklist. So,
oh, well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So it may be a 15 or all. We'll eliminate that 20.
Yeah, my only 2 cents to add is more of a general one with the housing shortfall that we have. Like, as we think about projects, and I'm not sure if we will have the opportunity to work on one for this round, so this all may be irrelevant. We would look at it and be like, okay, let's get rid of that unit that we propose and put a commercial space there instead. And I don't know, to get that 1 point, so we would lose a unit and provide a commercial space, and then maybe we'd lose another unit to provide the community gathering space. And from a sort of pure scoring perspective, that would be a wise thing to do. I don't know if that helps, and understand this is a nuanced trade-off. Once again, there's no easy decisions here, but just sort of thinking through what will rise to the top of the scoring. Make substituting units for other things here. This will score those projects higher, and just want to flag that as something that want to make sure that we think about that consequence too.
Thank you, Mick, for raising or elevating that. We will look at this point balance as compared to the underwriting, because as you lose units, and if you're still requesting the same amount of funds, that's going to impact the per unit cost. And how then, if the per unit cost is going to be higher because you have less units, or however that's rebalanced, we'll look at the rebalancing of that. But it's still, we are looking for mixed income projects or mixed use that can provide amenities and be beneficial to the entire community. But we also don't want that to be in lieu of providing affordable housing. So we will take a revisit of the point balance on those. Okay, next is getting into starting with the underwriting criteria. The developer qualifications should not be new to many of you if you're a returning applicant. But we have changed the evaluation from experience by years to experience by number of projects, because someone could say they've been in the business of affordable housing for 10 years, but have only done 2 projects over those 2 years. So we're looking more at the project experience of similar size and scope being proposed. And then we're also looking at how long the proposed team, and if it's a nonprofit and its internal team, or the nonprofit and the partners that it's going to work with have worked together. And then if a nonprofit is partnering with a for-profit, we are looking for an agreement that clearly shows that nonprofit role in ownership, decision-making, and long-term stewardship, and that would be an evaluation factor, but we don't want to penalize nonprofits that are not partnering with a for-profit, so they would be able to achieve the same amount of points. Project readiness. We are in a housing crisis. We are looking for projects that can get online as quickly as possible, and that the applicants and their team are really doing the due diligence around that. We certainly don't want to compromise a good affordable housing project, but again, we also want to make sure that it's not taking 5+ years to get these funds expended and projects built. So first, you saw at the beginning that there's a threshold requirement that on site control, but your site control will be evaluated on whether you have a deed already or a ground lease, which would be more points than if you have a sales contract or an auction agreement to purchase. The next series of points are how far along the applicant is in creating the plans and drawings for the project. This has been typical in past applications. Next is an evaluation on the zoning needs. So if the property needs to be rezoned and has not started, it will not be able to get any points. I know we haven't put 0 points on a lot of these, but we did want to provide some clarification around some newer things. If it needs rezoning and the process is underway, is it different? And then if the project does not need rezoning, that's 4 points. Again, we will be asking if you believe that the project is already entitled for the proposed project, that you get a letter from the zoning administrator. So there will be instructions on how you will demonstrate the zoning. Next is around infrastructure needs, whether the project or the site requires extensive infrastructure improvements, both on site as well as off site. Whether if there are some lesser needs on infrastructure, or if the infrastructure is sufficient, meaning all the utilities are available at the site and there's no other major infrastructure other than general site work involved. And we will be giving guidelines on how to obtain, or guidance on how to obtain, a utility availability letter to help you do some of this due diligence. But we're looking for the development team to work with their engineers and architects to make these determinations. Also would be an assessment of any other site constraints, topo challenges, potential environmental challenges. And so it's evaluated on how extensive these constraints might be and the impact on the development timeline. We want to make sure that the team has a demonstrated understanding of building codes and the permitting process. I didn't do these on the other webinars, but I do want to pause and make sure everyone knows that if you are awarded a Barnes Fund grant, or you do any other income restricted project through another funding source like low income housing tax credits, the home program, we have an affordable housing permit that we will create so that the plans reviews and permitting folks, as it goes through the review system, are automatically flagged. So if you weren't aware of that and you have a project, let us know. That's just a little sidebar. But we do want to make sure, though, that everyone understands these processes and has the expertise on the team. Then the last part is around those funding commitments. So the evaluation will include an analysis on how solid commitments for the remaining grant funds are, and if there are realistic plans for any commitments that aren't already secured. We are not going to count commitments for another project. It has to be specifically related for this site. And if you've applied for funds on the same address we're expecting you to list all of the funds that you've applied for, even if you were proposing to do maybe something different. We need to understand everything that might be happening with the site proposed. So I will pause here for any questions.
Carter, you can unmute at this time.
Thank you. So under project readiness, I've got a couple of concerns. The first one is the construction drawings and materials submitted. The first point is that it's vague. Getting construction documents or construction drawings can cost a development up to $600,000, even more. And if it's completed construction drawings and you haven't received a Barnes Award because you can't apply for it before, you're not incorporating the universal design checklist within those drawings. And so it's more expensive to go back if those are full drawings. So maybe what could be helpful here is more due diligence items. So for example, if they have a phase 1 or a geotech or a Alta survey completed, I think that would be a lot more meaningful for the quickness of deals that will proceed rather than having a fully designed project that you'll have to go back in to do. And then additionally, not only is it harder to do, but it can also hurt the nonprofits and the smaller local developers who are don't have the balance sheet to pay for all these drawings up front. Just wanted to make a comment on that one.
Thank
And
you,
then
Carter. Those are great comments. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. The other thing too that I have a concern about is the topographic site constraints for greenfield development in Nashville. The flat sites are gone, especially when you want to build income restricted housing on them. And now I can totally understand if it needed a brownfield agreement for environmental, or there was a big easement on it that would prevent it that you found out about later. But every site that we're taking through construction and every site that we're looking at does have topography constraints given the limestone in Nashville. So I would recommend that you guys remove the word topographic and potentially define what other serious site constraints could adhere to that.
Thank you, Carter. We'll take that into consideration also. Great points.
Stacy, I'm sending the request to unmute. Stacy, you may need to hit the unmute button on your WebEx screen. Stacy, if you like, you can submit your question in the chat and I will be sure to read it before we close.
Okay, while Stacy is working on her comment, are there any others on this slide before we move on and then go back to Stacy's comment once we receive it? Okay. Next, we will look at financial capacity and funding needs, still part of the underwriting criteria. Some of these are new in the financial capacity analysis, which is making sure that the recent financial audit means no outstanding fundings. And we will make sure and define that as an outstanding finding means that the organization has not submitted an acceptable corrective action plan or a management response to address those findings. And during a cure period, okay, I saw the chat. I'm going to pause. Stephanie, do you mind reading the chat?
Sure thing. From Stacy, this is a zoning question. Will reasonable accommodations approval be accepted?
That is a question you will need to ask the zoning administrator when you ask for the zoning letter. Back to the financial capacity. Also looking at the ensuring that the operating expenses support the cash flow of the organization. And then if an operating reserve can support at least 3 months of operating expenses, we need to make sure our nonprofit partners are financially sound. Again, because the developer fee is not intended to support the overall operations of the nonprofit. We are looking at how many open Barnes Fund contracts a nonprofit has. And then also for the open contracts, whether these contracts are making progress, meaning that they've met at least one milestone and have submitted a draw request. This applies to all open contracts except round 15, because those were just executed a few months ago. And there is not an expectation that these have started any draws yet. Some may have, but we want to give everyone a fair analysis. Then we get into funding need. There is an evaluation criteria. Excuse me, I want to mute for a second while I cough, or if I can mute. Oh, I don't see a button. Excuse me for clearing my throat. The developer fee is part, its percentage is part of the grant Barnes Fund budget, not the overall project budget. That then you can see an analysis on how much of the funding request is of the total project budget. The funding request may be a little bit higher if there is a certain percentage of Barnes Fund units at 30% AMI, or if there's permanent supportive housing. Same on the per unit subsidy by the per unit cost by bedroom size. So a 3 bedrooms unit cost is going to be different than the studio, so that we will be looking for a breakdown of all of the Barnes Fund units by bedroom size and the per unit cost for each of those units in relation to for this subject, for this evaluation criteria. And again, the threshold's a little bit different, or the criteria is different for projects or units that are designated 30% AMI or permanent supportive housing. So I will pause there for any questions or comments.
LCR you can unmute at this time.
First was just a general comment on the open contracts piece. Let's say a nonprofit has been sort of putting in one project for the last 3 years and developing a lot of affordable housing for the city. They will be less likely to be selected than a brand new organization that's never done any affordable housing before, I believe. So I understand that there is maybe an optics concern with projects being open, but just in terms of delivering units, and I think this sort of probably penalizes the folks maybe with the most experience on doing Barnes projects and delivering units. So I would wonder if that's worth reconsidering.
Nick, if I could pause there, if you
Yeah.
look at the points available for the open contracts, it's 1 or 2 points. If you go back to, get back, at the points available on experience, those are higher. So I think the balance of points leans toward organizations with experience in this more than it is the open contracts.
Great. Yeah, okay. I didn't put those two together. So thank you. Thank you for that clarification. That's really, really helpful. I appreciate that a lot. Not sure if these, and I need to think about this more, if the sort of funding request, project budget, and the per unit subsidy, I think they may end up basically calculating out the same way. I'm trying to think through exceptions to that, but just throwing that out there, and that's okay, I think. But just, I don't know if you have any thoughts about when you'd get sort of 2 points for one and 3 and 4 points for another in those, or would you always get the same scoring in both cases for the funding need, last two categories.
We really have to look at how it shakes out. I had the same thought, and if it shakes out with the same amount of points, that will be part of the evaluation if there's another way to approach it. But as we talk through the work sessions on moving away from having a flat per unit subsidy cap and more of looking at the efficiency of the funds, that both looking at it through the total project budget versus, because there could be a project budget of, a very, very big project and a little bit of Barnes fund, but then within that, only a few Barnes fund, and the per unit cost is very high. So those would be diverging in very different directions.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
they could align in a smaller scale project.
That's a I hadn't thought about that either. So I really appreciate that clarification. In terms of more of a mechanism, what I'm thinking about, especially with the per unit subsidy piece, is that because it's a percentage, you could potentially score more points and ask for more dollars if your per unit costs are really expensive. So let's just say one person can deliver units for $200,000 a unit, and someone else can deliver, unless someone else is proposing $400,000 a unit in per unit cost. They can ask for the same amount, and the one that is got the more expensive units is getting, or they could ask for more and score higher. So I like in terms of the total cost. And I want to think about, this is sort of the $19 million question here from my perspective, of how to be as effective and good stewards of these public dollars as we all want to be. But what I worry about with this particular one, which I know solves other problems, has the potential to be actually just rewarding a more expensive project rather than deliver units more efficiently, unless there's something I'm missing here too, like I did with my last two comments.
So first of all, let's remember every project has a cap. So we're not just able to calculate all of this, and be able to get more than the cap. So that's one of the first ceilings. But then as you look at, it's the subsidy the Barnes subsidy going into each of those units, and how efficient we're looking more for efficiencies and stretching of the Barnes Fund dollar than it is to covering more of the units. So if we can revisit how we've structured these, this particular one to better accomplish that level of efficiency with the Barnes Fund dollars, so that we're not rewarding an overfunding of a unit.
Yeah.
Did I see a chat pop up?
Yeah, it was more of an audio question, and
Oh.
it looks like it's been resolved.
Oh, okay. I did find a way to unmute myself a second ago. To mute myself to clear my throat, and I unmuted, so I didn't know if it took a minute for my audio to pick back up. Did I need to repeat anything before we move on? Okay. Well, any other questions? This is at the end. No, we've got bonus points, but before I move away from underwriting criteria, any questions or comments here? Great comments so far. Everyone who's commented, these have been really great and very helpful. Finally is the bonus points
We
for.
we
Go ahead.
did have Carter just raise his hand.
Okay, Carter.
Carter, if you're unmuted, we're not hearing you at this time.
Okay, looks like Carter's going to come back. All right, finally, our is an opportunity to get up to 8 points if you are proposing to do permanent supportive housing and designating units. Again, if we need to provide the range to make it clearer, we can do that. We will still be requiring anyone proposing to do this to follow the coordinated entry process established by our Office of Homeless Services. And while the Housing First model is seeming to be changing at the federal level, we do have an expectation of coupling, as the PSH says, with robust supportive services, and how we would be relying on the applicant to tell us how they would achieve this and what partnerships they've secured and how they would have the funding. I saw Carter's chat, and I will get to that in the subsequent slide. Reminding everyone, these are draft policies we are taking comments on. The official release will be in February, and there will be an announcement when that happens. So any questions on the evaluation criteria bonus points before we move to the next section? Okay.
Reed, I am sending the request to unmute now.
Thanks, Stephanie. I just want to say I appreciate all of you, and I can see the effort and the work y'all have put into these materials. I don't think we'll have time to get through all of my points, so I'm just going to make a few key points, and then I'll just email the rest of my specific feedback and recommendations. But the first one is, so UHS says Nashville needs 20,000 units of housing, of affordable housing, and Barnes is the main tool we have to get there. But when I look at the round 16 scoring rubric, I notice that it's awarding points to things that cost more and isn't necessarily focused on driving production of units. And if projects cost more, it means we need more funding. And if we need more funding, we're not actually producing housing. So I think I understand the policy priorities and the UHS policy priorities. And I think that it's an admirable goal, and but I think the rubric is the result of trying to be everything all at once, and I think the reality is a one-time $3 million grant is nowhere close to enough funding for a project to support deeply affordable housing or PSH units or long-term affordability or super sustainable and buildings that check 15 to 20 of the universal design standards. And I think kind of hearing all the comments, putting it all together, but incentivizing all these objectives at once is actually going to do the opposite of housing production, and it's going to set projects up to fail. Lenders aren't going to support a deal that's committing to 10, 15, 20% of the units that are deeply affordable without any sort of ongoing subsidy above and beyond Barnes. Like, it needs project-based vouchers, and vouchers aren't available that we know of, according to MDHA right now. And then I heard, Mick's point earlier regarding long-term affordability. But what happens to the residents in year 50 when operators can't take care of their properties because the long-term affordability period that they committed to get points is still in place, and rents are still affordable, and there's no additional funding beyond the initial Barnes grant that happened 50 years before? What happens to PSH units when the operator realizes they weren't prepared for how much additional staff, case managers, and replacement reserves that are necessary to successfully support those residents and their units. Will operate as return Barnes funds? Where will the residents go if that happens? And I think just generally asking the question, is Barnes prepared to vet and manage these sorts of issues? And one of the last points I'll make is, I know a lot of you are familiar with our Shelby House and SRC project. And just out of curiosity, we were looking at how well would Shelby House score today in round 16 if we were applying. And we wouldn't have qualified for points for PSH. We wouldn't have gotten points for deeply affordable. We wouldn't have gotten points for sustainability or design because we did 10 of the criteria, not 15 or 20 of the criteria. We wouldn't have gotten points for having done multiple projects with our partners because it was a first of its kind. And on Shelby House, we've been fortunate enough to receive Barnes, and it's been a huge success. And the project regularly receives national recognition and national awards. But today, on a round 16, Shelby House wouldn't score competitively, and it wouldn't get funded. It wouldn't get funded today under the UHS policy priorities. So I think my last message is we need Barnes funds to be successful. It's the main tool we have to help create affordable housing in Nashville. And we need to make a dent in the 20,000 units. But if we start pushing all these levers to the max at once, there won't be any funding left to build the housing. And so I think we need to focus on what will drive affordable housing production and make it easier to do that.
Thank you for those comments, Reed. I'll just say a few words in response. Some of the things you mentioned have always been Barnes Fund evaluation criteria, including the experience of the team, the sustainability and universal design checklists, and how many elements above the 10. Those have always been evaluation factors in the scoring matrices. We just laid them out a little bit differently. None of these evaluation criteria are requirements. These are designed that if a team can figure out how to accomplish these things with the right level of financing and the right way to handle this in the long term, we will be looking for that due diligence. But if it comes down to the fact that generally we can't, most projects can't do a large number of deeply affordable housing, but some may get a project-based voucher allocation and be able to do that. So we, compromising what we need to achieve, while we need more units, absolutely, we have populations that can't get into the affordable housing that we build because they have other barriers to that housing. And so we are looking to make sure that the Barnes Fund units that we are investing in is helping the people that need the housing the most, that haven't been able to access it. But a lot of these, even the special populations, have been part of a scoring matrix historically. So we're not necessarily creating new things out of the blue. We are making things much tighter because it is super competitive. And it may not work for a particular project, but it could work, and we can accomplish these goals if a team figured it out. But everybody's going to be evaluated on how well they can move toward this or not. And if it's generally in an industry that we're going to end up landing in a 30 to 40 year affordability term because of the lending environment, that is the reality of our lending environment. But if someone can figure out a longer term solution that could be financed, then we want to make sure that we give them that additional credit in the evaluation criteria. So that's where that was coming from. But we will certainly make sure that all of these comments that have been received are shared with the commission, and still an opportunity. And I'll talk next about the what happens from this process. Any other comments before I move on to the additional provisions in the RFA?
From Kelsey, should questions or comments from today also be submitted in writing?
Not necessarily, Kelsey. We're going to have the transcripts of this as well as a note summary that we'll share with the commission. But if you want to summarize all of your comments from your organization, including what you asked today in one email, that is perfectly fine, but it's not necessary.
And then we
Okay.
have a comment from Carter. Agreed that deferred maintenance that would result from a long-term deed restriction could be a result of lack of funding in the marketplace once we're all gone. The average shelf life of an apartment complex is 60 years. The long-term deed restrictions would prevent new being built. I request the Barnes policy to revise anything beyond 50 years.
Again, this is not a requirement. This is an evaluation criteria. Moving to the next, but we will take that under consideration. Additional provisions in the RFA is a section on the submission requirements. When we post the official release in February, and I will pause here because I don't think I mentioned this at the very beginning, we are looking to utilize the Neighborly platform that MDHA uses for the home program and get away from SurveyMonkey Apply. Not sure yet on that timing. If that will make us have a release date after February 9th, we'll know more by the commission meeting at the end of January. But regardless, the final grant policies will have all of these details. A new one is a prohibition on communication. This means once we have an official release and the application window opens, until the point after the commission votes on the recommended awards, applicants, any member of the team, of the applicant team, or any representative cannot contact a member of the housing division, not just the Barnes Fund team, any member of the housing division, because we have several of us working on policy pieces. So no communication with any member of the Housing Trust Fund Commission, and no communication with any member of the evaluation committee, even though we don't publish those. That could bar you from having your application be considered. We will provide a specific method for you to submit your questions on the final application. We will have a window where applicants can submit their questions in writing through a certain method, as well as we'll offer information sessions where applicants can join and ask those questions verbally. Outside of those two methods, there will be no ex parte communications with staff or anyone else on questions, because again, this is to ensure fair and equitable treatment of all applicants. All of the questions and comments made at the information sessions during the final release, as well as submitted in writing, will be summarized or provided with responses from our team and published on our website and sent back to everyone that submitted questions or joined those information sessions or have started working on an application in the portal. If you miss that application period deadline, you will not be able to ask questions afterwards. That would require us to open the application period back up for everyone. Then we will have a clear submittal format. We are, again, working to change to Neighborly. I imagine that will cause hiccups for all of us. We have not used it. Some of you may have if you've applied for grants, but we will make sure there's ample support that I've highlighted over on the far right of the screen. There will be a final deadline for submittal that will be published in the final release. And then new will be a cure period, a short cure period that we will follow up with an applicant if we need clarification on a response, or if we need some documentation that wasn't provided. We will, you can see highlighted, provide an applicant checklist that includes required uploads and additional or optional uploads. Hopefully everyone will submit those. The cure period is not intended for an applicant to finish completing an application, to build out a narrative, to change the scope, the funding, any substantial content. And then we'll move on once we have completed the evaluation process. The Housing Trust Fund Commission will approve the recommendations later in the spring. We will begin contracting soon or immediately thereafter with a much quicker timeline than with round 15. Everything must be approved by Metro Council before it becomes effective. And then once the Trust Fund Commission approves, excuse me, all of the recommended awards, we will meet with any organization that wasn't funded, the team will, and review the application with you. Once the contract has been executed, the team will host a mandatory grantee kickoff meeting to go over your obligations, the draw request process, and that is required before you can submit your first draw or we approve your first draw. We will describe the funds disbursement process. This is a reimbursable grant for cost incurred. So you must have the documentation of the cost incurred, with the exception of funding used to acquire property on the front end. We would, if you're not going to be reimbursed for your acquisition, then, and you need the funds to actually purchase, will require an escrow agreement with a third-party agent, and we will wire the funds to that escrow agent. We won't just cut a check to the nonprofit for that purchase. The grant policies in your contract will include the process for requesting amendments to the contract, what's required in your grantee files, your reporting requirements, and your obligations for, under monitoring and compliance. And then finally, we will, as I mentioned, have an application checklist, and then we will have technical assistance session and support only related to the portal. So if any time, even if it's outside of the question period on the RFA, we understand this is a new technology, a new platform. We want to make sure that if anyone's experiencing any technical issues, we have that support. When someone is seeking technical support on the platform, we will not accept questions on the content of the actual application. So any questions here on additional RFA provisions? Okay. Well,
Kelsey,
oh, go ahead.
Kelsey, you can unmute at this time.
Hey, this is Mick. Just wondering if it's worth further defining what the prohibition on communications are to be specifically about this round of funding, because the chances of many of us not bumping into and chatting with either about other affordable housing policy related things or other things going on in the city, it seems difficult for what will be close to, I think, a 5-month process. So just wondering if we could get that defined a little bit more. I don't want to like snub you next time I see you, Angie, after February.
Absolutely, Mick. We will make sure that it's clear. It's only related to this application.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you have another, were you?
No, that's enough for now.
Okay, yeah. Don't snub me or our team, but just don't ask us questions around round 16. How about that? But we'll make sure that that is very, very clear. Okay. So this concludes my part of the presentation. You have an opportunity to submit your comments in writing. You can include what you asked today, your comments from today. You can add more or different comments as well. We'll compile those all together. The commission will receive a red line version of any changes that we made from what was published, as well as the notes and transcripts from meetings and the comments. And for their meeting on January 27th, where they will vote on the final grant policies and scoring matrix. And of course, there will be an opportunity at the beginning of that meeting for public comment. If you feel inclined to also make your comments in person at that meeting. We will take your written comments through 4:00 p.m. on January 13th. We have already done the 2 other RFAs. This is our last one. You can submit your comments in writing at barnesfund@nashville.gov. And I'm going to pause and make sure, though, that if there are still other comments or questions, that we give some time for those. If you thought of some after we got through some of the slides, I can always go back.
Kelsey or Mick, you can unmute at this time.
I was just gonna say now that I just want to commend you guys on this and all this work that you've done into it. I know you've received a lot of comments on what you've done, and it's just fantastic that you've taken the time to do this and share and go through this much more intensive and in some ways likely annoying process with all of us. So it's really appreciated. So just want to say thank you so much.
Well, thank you for that. But we also want to thank all of you who have been providing comments. We've hopefully heard you and listened and have found a balance of being able to accomplish the city's goals with furthering really good projects. We can't meet every single need and make every single project work, especially with very limited funding. But we do value the time that you all put into providing your comments, coming to the meetings, and making comments there. But most importantly, you all are on here because you have a commitment to doing affordable housing and serving Nashvillians, and we want to thank you and commend you for that work. Any other comments or questions that you've thought of? Okay. Well, I didn't open with Happy New Year, but I hope everyone's New Year is off to a great start. Thank you for joining us this morning. And thank you for your very thoughtful and constructive and respectful comments. We are so deeply appreciative, and we'll take every single one of these very seriously and research them. And if we are not able to incorporate them, we will make sure that we are providing a reason to the commission and to everyone on what could be incorporated and what was not. And we look forward to seeing you at the commission meeting on the 27th. It will be, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're back at Sunny West. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Okay. So, well, thank you all for the kind chats that are popping up. So I'll give a few more minutes if anyone has any other things to add. All right. Well, thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.